SABMiller reported a 3% rise in beer volumes in the last 3 months of 2011, led by the emerging markets of Africa and Latin America, which helped offset falls in North America and in Europe. The world's second largest brewer and maker of Miller Lite, Peroni and Grolsch said that beer price rises helped the group to push up its underlying revenue in its October-December third quarter by 7%. And it's under discussion today, except Chris Gilmour is sitting on the sidelines today. Daniel Krause is going to take this stock on. So SABMiller, it's a company that many people have been focusing for quite some time, and it's performed really well, 3% up into today's session, 293 Rand. And we even had Citigroup raising its price target and also saying that it is a buy right now. Your prognosis on SAB?
Yeah, look, I would possibly agree with that. It is a buy right now. It is fairly stretched though. So a buy right now, again, I'd probably rather look for a pullback. The whole market is slightly stretched, including breweries. It's trading at a PE of 18. So look, at a PE of 18 for breweries is probably in line with international competitors or international breweries or beverage companies. Relative to the JSE, it's actually slightly overpriced. The all-share index PE is slightly lower than that. So at current levels, it's probably going forward as a long-term hold, I would probably agree with that. It is a buy, and I would agree with that broker upgrade. But yeah, geez, I mean, huge business. So many acquisitions in the past couple of years.
Foster's, of course, being the most controversial.
Most recent, yeah, that was very controversial. That finally got approved towards the end of last year, and they're very quickly catching up to the biggest brewery in the world, which is InBev Anheuser-Busch. They're actually slightly behind, and they've actually caught up quite quickly in the last couple of years.
With regards to some of the volumes that we saw coming through from Latin America, premium lager growth in excess of 30%, and then you see Europe's lager volumes down around 2%. So clearly the emerging market space really pushing the latest numbers much higher. Is that where the big focus is going to be? Because SABMiller is so diversified, so it mitigates the risk, but then also drags its overall earnings potential lower because it is so entrenched in Europe and North America.
Yeah, absolutely. So growth in America and Europe is slightly subdued because of increased competition. There's a lot of competition from local breweries in Europe and America as well. Again, the biggest one is InBev Anheuser-Busch, which they very highly compete with in America. And emerging markets is really the South African breweries space. They've covered that whole, they've got a global footprint on emerging markets. As you said, in Latin America and India, they've had increased sales and they're trading up there at 21%. So they've had massive numbers coming from around the world. They're in 21, I think it's 21 African countries alone. Very few people can compete with them, and their acquisition of Foster's actually in Australia. I mean, one would question as to why they would buy that.
Were you happy with that? Because a lot of investors saying, well, we don't understand why head into a company that is in Australia, because it's a developed market.
Yeah, I think people also need to understand, yes, it is a first world country, yes, it is a developed market. There's a lot of Chinese people, believe it or not, in Australia, and somehow, you know, that country is still growing somewhat like an emerging market. They've never had a recession in Australia ever, and it continues to grow consistently year on year in terms of GDP and growth. So it kind of behaves like an emerging market economy, although it's a first world country. So it does somehow fit into their forward path and where they want to take the business to, and why not have some exposure to Australia if they didn't have, if they can afford it and they want to, and they think there's a lot of value going forward, then why not?
And the strategic alliance as well with Anadolu Efes, I hope I'm saying that correctly, that was announced in October last year. Yeah. So obviously trying to create larger footprints in every area that they're in.
Correct, yeah. So they acquired that business, or they actually took a 24% stake in that business, and that is largely in the Ukraine and Russian regions, which again in the trading update now, in the Russian region they actually had quite poor sales, whereas in the Ukraine region they had extremely good sales. And that company is predominantly in those two areas as well as a whole lot of other countries. So by acquiring a 24% stake in that, they get exposure to a whole lot of other countries that they didn't have. But also, just quickly, they've a Turkish family in Anadolu Efes is quite a big shareholder in that business. And if they were to sell that stake, that Turkish family, Breweries has got the first right to actually buy that stake, which would give them a bigger stake than 50%. So it would give them a controlling stake in that business.
Quite a rosy picture that you're painting. But the question is it hot enough to buy? And you were alluding to it earlier. Is it hot or not?
For me, as a long-term business, it's very hot. It's a cash cow, great management. They pay good dividends. So on a long-term view, it's very hot. I like it. I think there's good growth. I would be kind of scared to pay up at these sort of levels, buying at around 300 Rand. Slightly pricey. I think if it pulls back, I'd like to pick some up. But as a long-term investment in equity portfolio, great stock, good dividends, good management, and continue to have good performance.
Fantastic. On that note, it's time for our guest hot stock picks, and we're not going to ask Chris Gilmour if he thought SAB is hot or not, but we are going to ask you what your hot stock pick is. And I'm so happy that you've become so innovative, because I'm sure the last time I did the show with you, it was exactly the same hot stock. So tell me why. JD Group again.
Eleni, I learned many years ago that when you really feel passionately about a stock and you believe that it's hot, then you must keep on punting it. But just for you, the next time we chat, I'll get something else. Look, there are a number of nice things about JD. First of all, there's still quite a lot of margin enhancement to come through. And I think we'll get a flavour of that once they give their next update next month. You know, they're changing their year end. And we'll get a nice update in February as to what's going on there. Secondly, I think we're going to see an awful lot more made of their consumer finance company, because it's at this point in time still a little bit lazy. They need to gear that up. They need to move into new areas, which they're going to do with their car rental scheme. And then last but not least, they're going to take the whole Steinbuild operations from the past, which they bought from Steinhoff, and they're going to start expanding that quite considerably into new areas, predominantly at the lower end of the market. So I think they've done their homework. They really understand it. But what really enthuses me about it is the fact that currently at these sort of levels, although it's had a nice rise in the past few months, it's still way, way, way below the levels that we saw back in 2000.
Over 1 year, it's only up around 25%. We've had other stocks that have run much harder.
Yeah, no, you're right. So compared to 2007, 2008, when it hit almost 100 rands, you know, there's a lot more space left, in my opinion. And I think...
Were you punting it as a hot stock back then as well, when it was almost 100 Rand?
No, certainly
Were you saying it was slightly expensive?
Certainly wasn't. No, definitely not. Definitely not. So I think we've got a lot more space left, and no, I like it.
Do you like it?
I do. I mean, all the retailers in the whole market have had a massive run. The food retailers, the furniture retailers. I do like the business. Again, it's possibly slightly overstretched, but I think also one can notice that there's been a little bit of a shift from the retailers into the banks. And possibly, you know, maybe they're also at the top of the trading range.
So your hot stock pick tonight is Absa Investments. Tell us why.
I've chosen Reinet. It's a short-term trade, as well as a long-term trade as well. We recommended it on stockalert.co.za. We bought it around 1360 odd, and our target in this trade, because it's a short-term trade, is 14.50 Rand, which is its previous all-time highs. It's actually technically just come down a bit. We've picked it up at these levels. So we're looking for between 6 and 7% on a short-term trade within a geared product is quite a nice move. The stop loss on the trade is around 1330 odd. And they've got a substantial stake in British American Tobacco. Number one, they've got about 84 million shares. And today there was also some news on Reinet that they're actually acquiring a business abroad, which is called the Pension Corporation, which is about to be finalized. And they've got other investments. They've got a lot of cash. They hold a lot of euros. So it's a good, solid fund. So you're actually buying into a fund. And it's you know, the chairman is Johan Rupert, who's of course a business genius.
I quite like the fact that you said it's a short-term play and a long-term play.
Yeah,
so the traders.
Yeah, so for the traders, for the traders, we're buying it at these levels. We're looking for 1450 as a target. Yeah. There's 1450 is resistance at the moment. So if it happens to break that, I think it'll continue to move higher, and it tracks BTI very, very closely. So as a long-term investment, you're taking a view on BTI, which I think a lot of people are very bullish on. People continue to smoke around the world. And that's just the way it is. They're also a huge cash cow. So Reinet will follow them quite closely. And I like it as a long-term trade.
Very quickly, do you agree, Chris?
I like BTI. And the only problem I have with Reinet, I think you've got some fees in there that the Rupert family are taking. And those are quite hefty. Yeah. That's one thing that bothers me.
We have to say goodbye, gentlemen. Thank you so very much for joining us. Great to have you on the program. That's it for Hot Stoxx. From me, Eleni Jokos, and my guests. It's goodbye.